Appreciate you joining us today. If you want to tell us, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Jennifer Rentch. I am currently the owner and lead coach for Meridian Performance. We're an endurance-based coaching company, primarily triathlon, but we also do marathons, long distance trail racing, mountain biking, all the other endurance sports that kind of fall under that umbrella. But primarily, long course triathlon is our specialty.
Very cool.
And what do you do? Who are you?
I am Antoinette. I'm a pelvic health physical therapist.
Great.
So how'd you get involved with triathlons?
It's kind of a funny story. It was a dare. Actually, my husband was working out with his personal trainer at the time, and John, his trainer, said, "Hey, I'm doing this triathlon. You should do it with me." And my husband said, "No, but my wife will." He signed me up. I had taken a rather long hiatus from sports. I was very, very active in sports during, all through high school, even up into college. And then, took a 15 to 20 year hiatus from doing anything organized at all. But I was looking for a change in life, and this just seemed like a really good, interesting, fun way to do something new. I do not have a running background, and I played tennis, I swam, I played lacrosse, field hockey, all short burst stuff, no real endurance-based sports. But yeah, did my first one on my 32 or 35 pound hybrid bike that had RockShox on the front forks and the seat, and thought I was going to die pretty much the whole entire time, but was immediately hooked. Signed up for 3 more that year, and that's where it started.
And what is a triathlon for people that don't know?
So there are multiple distances, but it's always swim, bike, run in that order, unless there's something wrong with the swim, like inclement weather or waves or something like that. Then it can be a run, bike, run, or sometimes just a bike run, depending on what's happening that day. And then there's the sprint distance, which is the shortest, and then Olympic, half Ironman, and a full Ironman.
And as far as from a training perspective, like how would you approach like training for something that involves 3 different domains?
None of us are going to be the best at any one of them. I think the goal is that you try and build up the endurance levels for each person based on what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. You train the weakness specifically. So if they're a really good runner, but they haven't been a cyclist, we'll definitely be working on cycling far more. A lot of people come to this without knowing how to swim, so that's always often one of the bigger barriers that we have to get into swimming, get into endurance swimming, and then also open water swimming, which is a completely different animal. So you have to approach each athlete separately and completely differently based on what their skills are and their skill set available. Some people have come to me not even owning a bike, never having done anything, but they were an endurance sport beforehand. They played water polo, or they were a long distance rower, or that we have had people that were mountain climbers. All people that understood suffering and understood what endurance sports were, but just didn't have specific skill sets in this. So while we had to start from scratch with those people, they had a base knowledge already of, training and progression and stuff like that. So, as we said, each person's different and each person's unique.
So when someone reaches out to you, then like how do you go about assessing where they're going to need the most help, and how to design their program?
It's a pretty lengthy intake call, usually hour and a half, assessing what they've done, where they are in life, how much they work, what other life stressors do they have? Do they have kids? Do they have a wife? Does their wife has an equal and abiding passion in some other sport or something else in life? Because triathlon can be a pretty selfish sport. And then, going through, have you been a runner in the past, or do you know how to swim? Do you have a bike at all? What kind of bike do you have? There's a whole lengthy process which we go through and gather all that information to determine whether or not what their goals are is going to fit with them within the time frame that they think that they want to do something in. So, typically if someone is starting from bare basics, obviously we're going to, want them to do some sprints and Olympics and kind of work on that for the first year, get some skills, understand the process, understand how the triathlon works, how the transitions work, how nutrition works, all the different components of it. And then after they've gotten comfortable in all of those disciplines, then we can move up to longer distances.
And I would assume too, there's probably a really steep learning curve with not just the training portion, but also like what equipment to get and how to pursue that.
Yes, I have often had to hand out quite a lengthy shopping list, and it can be triathlons. The barriers to entry to triathlon are pretty high. It's a very expensive sport. Now you don't have to. The equipment these days is so good. You don't have to have a $10,000 or $12,000 or $15,000 bike. I mean, it's certainly nice if you can afford that, but that's not necessary. There are some really good now entry-level equipment for people, but the bike is obviously the biggest, probably your biggest purchase. We usually require that people have a smart trainer so that they can train either during the week, during early mornings before work, or after work when you can't get out on the road. That can be kind of it's a big piece of equipment. It's a big purchase, but it lasts you. My last one lasted 12 years. So over time you get your money out of it. And then yes, then you need possibly a wetsuit, and you need goggles, and you need sports nutrition, and you need the coaching on top of that, and all the other things that come along with it. So yeah, for somebody who is completely new to the sport, the shopping list is pretty extensive. So.
As far as when you're getting started, I'm sure the equipment was a little bit different. So what was your experience getting involved with figuring out how do I select the bike? How do I get it fitted?
I had no idea what I was doing. And I think, we were lucky. We had some friends who were already involved in the sport. So they kind of took my husband and I under their wing and, helped us along. We, like I said, I started on this hybrid bike. And immediately after the first race went out and bought another bike, which was completely wrong also. I didn't know anything about getting a bike fit. I didn't understand. I mean, we just had the tech in the bike shop. It's like, yeah, that looks good. And it was fine for the next 6 to 8 months of racing as I progressed. And same thing with running shoes and, all the equipment that you need. A lot of it was just experimentation because everybody's anatomically different. Everybody has different physical limitations as well. So some people can, ride very aggressively in their bike position, and some people cannot. All of this takes a little bit of trial and error. And then, that's what a coach also helps you with, as well as a coach, I can also push some of these people to other experts in other areas. If I feel like they need a very specific something with their bike, I have bike fitters all over the United States that I know of that I can set people up with based on where they're located. Or PTs. You need some kind of special assessment because your run form there's something a little bit funky about it, and that as you start going longer and longer on these race distances, all those little foibles will come into play because of the repetition of everything that we do. So, we're all about going fast and going straight and going forward. There's very little side to side in any of our stuff, but you may have something, 100,000 revolutions in, 25 miles of bike riding. And if your bike fit is off when you get off that bike to go run your 10K or half marathon, whatever the run distance is for that race, you may have some issues. So there's a lot to it with regards to getting all this dialed in perfectly that we spend a lot of time on.
So going back to now, obviously you have much more knowledge now than when you first started. So when
Sure.
you first started and you're invited to do this first triathlon, like how did you tailor that approach at that time? And what would you do differently?
I don't know if I would do anything differently looking back. I think my husband and I started this as just sort of something to do, something that was fun. We wanted to branch out. We wanted to get back to being athletic. He was very, very athletic all the way through college. He had a sports baseball scholarship. I was very athletic. And then we both had taken this rather long hiatus. And so we were looking to get healthy again. So this seemed like a really fun way. It's a lifestyle, much, so that, you're sort of living and breathing it really if you're really serious about it. And when we first started it, like I said, we did 3 races that first year, made all the mistakes. I mean, every mistake, but it was fine. We were just having fun. And then the next year we decided to get a little bit more serious, and we were living in DC at the time, and there's a local series there that encompasses all of the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And so we just did a race every weekend. And yeah, like I said, we made every single mistake you could possibly make, but it was fine because there wasn't as much pressure because, well, okay, we messed that up this time. Next weekend, I'll work on something else, try not to mess it up. And, we just built a knowledge base by, repeat, mistake, repeat, do something different, repeat. And, and we just had fun while we were doing it. There wasn't a lot of pressure at the time. We were just doing it for fun, like I said.
And then how did you go from that to deciding that you wanted to have your own training company?
So after we had progressed and we moved up to long course triathlon is considered the half iron distance or the full iron distance. So the half iron distance is 1.2 mile swim, a 56-mile bike, and a half marathon. And the full distance is double that, 2.4, 112, and a full marathon. We had progressed on our own without coaching, without outside coaching. But like I said, we did have some mentors in the local area that we were training with and working out with, and they would give cues or give help to us. And we did our first Ironman, full distance Ironman in Mexico in 2010. And both of us had pretty decent races. We really didn't know what we were doing. We just stumbled through it. But, we did well. And we were pretty excited. And I think we were also on a local tri team at the time in Washington, D.C., and people saw that we were kind of making this progression, and people started asking us a lot of questions and asking for tips and asking for help. And as I said, the triathlon can be pretty expensive. So we, as we were consulting with people, we decided that maybe we should get some certifications and get some insurance and before we started offering, full-on advice to people. And maybe this would help pay for our very expensive hobby. So, most of these races are held, especially the long course races, are held all over the world. So I've raced in Mexico, Canada, Europe several times, Australia, all over the United States. And so you're paying for all the travel, plus your bike travel, plus, accommodations, all that other kind of stuff. So it adds up. And then, so we thought, well, we were both working full time, and we thought, well, we could just do a little side business, and we'll coach some of our friends and charge them a little bit, and learn some more in the process as well. So that's how it came about. And then when COVID, I was an event planner in DC for 25 years. When COVID hit in 2020, my company dissolved, and I became a full-time coach. So.
And you coach people across the U.S. then?
We do. We have people all over the East Coast because that's where we're known. We have a couple athletes in California. We had some in Texas. When my husband was coaching a little bit more than he is now, he had somebody on a submarine, actually, who was an XO. So he did all his work in the South Pacific underwater. That sounds pretty miserable, actually.
You trained for a triathlon
Trained
underwater.
for a full Ironman on a submarine.
Ironman, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had a doctor. She was in the military. She was stationed in South Korea. So she was on a base, wasn't allowed to leave. So she did all her training on base, running around the base 200,000 times to, get her runs in, that kind of thing. And most of her work was on a trainer. I mean, so we've had some pretty unique athletes, but predominantly most of them are just normal people working daily, normal lives and daily normal jobs kind of thing. So,
and would you have to take a lot of things that people maybe wouldn't think of into account, such as things like someone's like individual nutrition or the climate that they're training in or going to be performing in?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're cold weather versus hot weather, training and racing are almost two completely different animals with regards to nutrition, electrolyte supplement, heat loss, people with, there are a lot of people that are very sensitive to heat and humidity. So all of that has to be taken into account. So, if you're doing, I had an athlete last weekend doing a race in Mexico. She's stationed, she lives in Richmond, Virginia, so obviously it's not very warm there right now. So we did, her last couple of weeks were indoor rides, obviously 3 and 4 hour rides on the trainer. But, heat, she didn't use a fan. She had extra layers on to help acclimate and get used to sweating. You can also use sauna protocols. If we have somebody going out to the World Championship in Hawaii, we typically have a request that our athletes go out, anywhere from 7 to 10 days ahead of time, just to acclimate to the humidity and the heat and all of the different things that you experience out there. So there are things you can do, and all of that. And then nutrition also has to be based on where they're going to be racing as well.
It's a lot of things to take into account, and I'm sure that you have to learn those things as you go, kind of like through trial and error. But then you also have to seek out information with each individual subspecialty. You have to start learning about hydration and how electrolytes influence it. You have to start learning about what macronutrients should they have, and obviously people might have different needs depending on where they're starting at as well. And some people probably don't even when they start, they probably don't even think of should I eat carbs? Should I eat fat? Should I?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a background in nutrition. I know a fair amount about nutrition. I am not a registered dietitian, however, so I can't prescribe a diet. But I can certainly give recommendations. And I do talk to my athletes about, I have vegetarian, I have vegan, I have regular meat eaters, carnivore diet people. So you have to kind of work with them and make them comfortable. And sometimes it's tough. I've had several young women that I've coached that just don't want to eat at all, and and that's also another huge problem, because especially long course triathlon, it is a strength and nutrition event. Anybody can swim, bike, and run if they do the proper training, but you can't put it together if you get behind in your nutrition, and that's a huge deal. As far as day-to-day nutrition, I will consult with people. I'll give recommendations on what I think that they should be possibly consuming, recommendations. But if they're really getting in looking for specific a diet or diet-related information, I have someone that I refer to that she's a specialist in this area. She's worked with some of the best marathoners in the world and that kind of thing. So she truly, and she was also an Ironman for a number of years. So she truly understands the sport. So she's based out of Buffalo, and I recommend athletes to her directly.
So Jennifer, I'm really impressed to hear about all of this planning and variability that goes into training triathletes. That's really cool. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences with training yourself?
So about 5 or 6 years ago, I had a very good friend who was a professional. She won both 70.3 Worlds and the Ironman World Championship. She's very well known. Her name's Leanne DeCave. And she was great and took me on as one of her first coaching athletes. So it was a learning process for both of us. I was new to being coached, and she was new to coaching. So, but it was a really successful collaboration for a number of years. I think I worked with her about 5.5, 6 years. And I immediately qualified for the World Championship right after within the first year that I was with her, dropped an hour and a half off my Ironman time, which is a pretty remarkable amount of time when you're 51. And it was great until it wasn't. But that wasn't her fault. That was all mine. And, I was, again, training for the World Championship in Kona in 2022. And I just was really struggling. Looking back, I can see now that I was starting to struggle in maybe 2020. And I noticed things like, greater fatigue, lack of recovery on my part. Injury recovery was taking so much longer than before. I was also sort of just apathetic about the training in general, which has never been the case. I just was really struggling mentally. At the time, I didn't really understand what was happening. I attributed it to COVID, to losing my job, to kind of transitioning to a new part of my life, to trying to figure out where I was going. We didn't know if triathlons were going to be coming back. I mean, nobody knew how long COVID was going to go, right? So I just sort of took it with a grain of salt, and I struggled through, and I was training really hard, and I managed to race again in Ironman Maryland in 2021 and got a qualifying spot, barely, but I did it, and it was ugly, but it got it done. And I thought, okay, well, this is great, so I can do this again. There's nothing wrong with me. But after that, as I was leading up to my race in 2022, I just struggled. Every day it was tears. It just, fatigue, crushing fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, mild bouts of vertigo. I was having rashes, which I didn't realize at the time. I thought that was from maybe an allergy to chlorine. We spent a lot of time in the pool. And at that, right after COVID, you were leaving your swimsuit on when you left the pool. So I thought, well, maybe it's just that. There are all these different symptoms going on. None of them, I didn't have hot flashes. I didn't have, I didn't have some of the more typical menopausal symptoms. But I did notice a deterioration in my VO2 max, my functional threshold power. These are all big metrics that we use to set our various training zones. I wasn't able to do the intervals and some of the workouts that my coach was prescribing, and there was no sense. It just made no sense to me. So I went to my doctor for an actual checkup, and I mentioned it, and he was a very nice man, but he just sort of gave me that, oh, well, you have to just recognize that this is your time and that you're never gonna be the same. Things are gonna you're just gonna have to live with it. And I got really mad at that answer. It didn't seem like that was like the answer I was looking for. So, long story short, I struggled through. I finished the race in 2022. It was not good. I mean, I got it done, and whatever. I was proud to be there. I did the best I could do that day. But it certainly wasn't the race that I had hoped or had trained for. But, it was fine. I was glad that I made the finish line. So after that, I kind of took a long break, and I touched base with another doctor that was sort of breaking into the menopause area, and she was trying a more holistic approach, which I thought at the time was like great. And I didn't really realize at the time that until I had actually went into menopause, actually 2 days before that race in 2022. That was really what was happening. So, it was a process. I guess in some ways I look back and I'm really lucky that my periods of distress and anxiety and discomfort were fairly short-lived compared to some people. Some women I know, have been experiencing this for 10, 12, 15 years, whereas I feel like mine was a fairly compressed period. I don't know why, but maybe from 20 to 22 is where I really noticed where things kind of like slid downhill. And I also have to take responsibility for some of that in that, out of sheer desperation, even as a coach, I know better. I stopped eating as much. I didn't fuel my workouts as well. I was desperate to lose weight. I had gained about 30 pounds. I was training 18 to 20 plus hours a week, long, hard, workouts, and continuously gaining weight over a 2-year period. I went from like 135 to almost 165. Nobody wants to show up at Kona looking, less than wonderful. So, mentally, I think that just put me also in another state as well. So, it's a tough thing, and I don't think it's addressed very well in our sport. Triathlon has been predominantly a male-dominated sport. When I first started back in the 2008s, it was maybe 80-20 men to women. And then, it's gradually come around to be more, a little more even, depending on where you are and where you are in the United States. It can be anywhere like 60-40. It's still more of a men-based sport. And I think much of the coaching is based on men, not on women, and women specific. If you go to Europe, it's 80-20 still, and parts of South America and other parts of the world. So, I don't know that as a coach or my coach, she even knew to question, like, is this going on? And, it's something I think that as more and more women are joining this sport, that we need to be more conscious as coaches to help bring this to the forefront and make it so it's something that needs to be talked about. It's not something that should be pushed under the rug or like, oh, you'll be fine, or you should just accept that you're going to be this much slower or this much more in pain or this not able to recover. So
yeah, I would imagine that's really challenging for people that are used to kind of pushing the limits and everything. How did you recognize that it was perimenopause? Was it one certain symptom? Was it an amount of time that went by?
I think the doorbell rang when I was speaking to another woman who I just know from racing around the United States. She's in my age group. She's from my area back in Maryland, and she mentioned to me a similar experience with her and her doctor. And I didn't really, at the time when she told me the story, I was still feeling good. She told me this story in about 2019. She was my age though, but she had obviously entered into the more transitional period a little bit earlier. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, but I didn't really think much of it. And then as I noticed my symptoms becoming more and more severe, I started to realize like, oh, wow, that's what's happening to me as well. But no one ever spoke about it. My doctor didn't say, "Oh, are you experiencing any of these issues? If so, maybe we could address it by attempting this, or this, or maybe you should do this." Or no, there was no discussion on this. It was just like, "Oh, this is just the way it is. You should learn to live with it." So
knowing what you know now and all the experience you have with coaching people, what do you wish was told to you or made available for you?
I think that this change is going to happen. You can't stop it, but there are definitely ways that you can address it. Unfortunately, hormone therapy has had a very negative connotation since the early 2000s when a bunch of studies that were done that were incorrect. It's been proven incorrect. Obviously, you know more about this than I do, but now it's, I think doctors and doctors who specialize in men and women in menopause are prescribing it. And that's, it's something that could have helped me much sooner. And from what I understand now, based on some of the research that I've done, that as soon as you start to experience any of these symptoms, you should be getting hormone tested and addressing these things earlier on rather than when everything's on fire. So
Totally agree.
yeah, and so I would always ask people to go get all these tests. That I had a battery of tests done, and hormones and cortisol and all the different things that go along with it. And I had no idea how bad I was. In fact, my doctor ran them twice because she had never seen somebody so low. So
Wow.
yeah, kind of crazy. So, but yeah, and once I went on therapy, I would say within 2 months, I would say good 95% of my symptoms have subsided.
That's
Or
fantastic.
become increasingly manageable.
Cool. And then from a training and coaching perspective, if people are sort of going through this, do you sort of modify or adjust their program based on what's going on?
Yeah, I'm learning as I go along as well. There's not anything out there. That's what I was saying about this being a men-dominated sport. I don't see. There's the very famous menopause specialist, Dr. Stacey Sims. Her famous quote is, "Men are not small, or women are not small men." Mm-hmm. So, and I think that we need to take that approach to training. And yeah, we do coach in Meridian Performance. We have several women in this age group, and so we are doing our very best to adapt and find our way through, picking a path to make it work, and not get that crushing fatigue that I was experiencing, or the depression, or the all the other symptoms by increasing recovery, encouraging increased strength training. I would rather somebody give up a run workout and go strength train, either or, versus going out and running and then saying, "Oh, I can only do a half-assed strength program." I think there needs to be a different emphasis on recovery, on short burst interval training, and strength, as well as also dietary needs as well. Women, I think, tend to, as they start to gain a little bit of weight, start to restrict calories. We need to encourage that they need to not be restricting their carbohydrates, because you're not burning your fat as efficiently once you've lost all your estradiol. And so that, you need these carbohydrates to fuel those workouts as well. So there's a lot of information out there that needs to be distilled down. I'm, researching it every single day. It's a lot. It's a lot to take on. But, we're trying to apply it to our athletes as we go along. And, I think based on my experience, my husband seeing it and seeing what happened to me, and me knowing what happened to me, we're doing our very best, but there isn't a ton out there. So, we have a lot, as coaches, they have to get recertified. I'm an Ironman certified coach as well as a USAT certified coach. So we have various continuing education requirements, and so I'm trying to find those courses that will fit for that also will give me additional information on that. So it's tough. It's not an easy process.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of parallels to that sort of in the healthcare system. A lot
100%.
of menopause is this very popular topic right now, finally, which is great. And I
Yeah.
feel like we're all talking a lot, we're all learning a lot, we're all trying to get
Yeah.
as good as we can with it.
Yeah, and also the other thing is it's very individual. Like I had a bunch of symptoms, but I didn't have like some of the most common ones. I had I had the libido issue, minor hot flashes. I had the sleep issues, but I had episodes of vertigo, anxiety and fear, depression. Also, gluten intolerance, I'm finding out, is something I didn't know I had gluten intolerance. I bet after much research on all these rashes that I was having, it finally came about that while I'm not celiac, I have non-celiac gluten intolerance, and I can no longer eat it. Well, I can eat it on a special occasion, but I'm going to have a rash. It's not going to kill me. But that is actually becoming more common and becoming a symptom of a lot of women are experiencing. So yeah, these things you just don't know. That I didn't realize that this was all part of it. Everybody thinks it's going, the sleep issues and hot flashes. That's all most people talk about.
Right.
So yeah, there's so much more.
And do you think that if this was something that you knew about prior, or maybe knew to expect some of these things, or know what you know now, do you think that transition would have been easier for you?
I think I would have been a stronger advocate on my own part. I don't think I advocated for myself as strongly as I should have. I was sort of paralyzed. I felt invisible. I just felt, just not there. The sky was gray, and you just don't know where to go. You don't know where to start. So I was really lucky that a friend of mine put me with this other doctor who was trying to, as I said, break into helping women with this issue. But she was doing it from a holistic approach, which sounded great at the time. But she was talking about meditation and yoga and all these other things that, I was at a level at that point, which I didn't understand because I hadn't been tested, that stuff, beneficial, was certainly not going to be what I needed. But again, it's such an individualistic process for everybody. No woman experiences it the same way. And I think that everybody needs to be, you need to start from ground zero and get tested. And then from there, then you set forth a plan on how to deal with it. So again, it's so individual. So, but yes, if I had known, I think I probably would have advocated for myself a little bit stronger and asked for, or gone to a different doctor immediately when my first one gaslit me and said, well, this is just part of life, get used to it, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people can really relate and
I
learn
hope
from
so.
your story.
I mean, and that's the thing, it needs to be talked about. And I'm talking about it to my husband's friends, our friends, other people we race with or have raced with, in an effort to just share, you need to tell your wives and your girlfriends that also are doing this, that it's okay, that this is what's happening, that it's a thing, but you can deal with it. And a lot of people just don't know where even to start. So, yeah.
Well, we appreciate you joining us today, Jennifer, and telling your story. You want to go ahead and say your company name again? And
Meridian Performance, Meridian Performance, and meridianperformance.com. If you're interested in contacting me, you can contact through the website at inquiries@meridianperformance.com or directly to me, Jennifer, at meridianperformance.com.
Excellent. We'll put everything in the show notes for everyone. And once again, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.